GM, welcome to another Touchgrass podcast episode. Today we have Dino. Iconic day, the Coinbase ICO stuff has just ended. I have him live, sort of talking about the reactions as it's happened. Dino, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Good to be here.
Awesome. How are you feeling, man? Congratulations on the raise.
Thanks. Yeah, it feels good, man. It was a crazy few days, honestly, right? Like we launched this thing, aside from the general market conditions, we launched it about an hour after Trump made that tweet about just like wiping out a civilization. And I think right when we hit the launch button for the ICO, that was starting to really proliferate throughout Twitter. So we were like, God damn, like all I saw on my feed right after that. So it was like it was like a slow start, which was a little bit anxiety inducing. But yeah, it worked out well. We just closed the roundup maybe a few hours ago and oversubscribed. So feel pretty good.
Awesome. How's it been working with Coinbase on this stuff? Like, obviously, the only other raise they've done is with Monad, Fluent being the second one. How was that experience? Talk to us about collaborating with that team.
Yeah, it was good. Actually, one more thing about the round, which a lot of people have been asking recently, and maybe your viewers might find interesting. We maybe however many months ago we did this like NFT sale thing. If you're familiar with like Mega ETH Fluffle, like we kind of tried to go for a similar thing. The reality is it was like way too convoluted. Like we learned a lot from that, and I just want to touch on this because I think that did actually inform how the ICO shaped up, right? And so we did this thing. We have this like reputation and some of these like some core elements of Fluent. Like we were really excited about it, really trying to think creatively around like the mechanics and all this kind of stuff and how it related to reputation. So we did this kind of like tiered discount based on reputation, all this stuff we had in our heads. And then like you meet the market and you're like, okay, well, like maybe they like it, maybe they don't. In this case, it's clear, like they're like, okay, cool, I like this reputation stuff you guys have going. But like what I like even more is like an extremely simple, straightforward sale. And so it turns out like that was just like convoluted, frankly. In hindsight, I do see how people found it that way. And so I mean, people bought some of the NFTs and participated, and I'm super grateful for that cohort of people. But like frankly, we learned that it just needed to be so much simpler. So I think part of what made this ICO actually work is we optimized for simplicity. We're just like, okay, let's make it's like don't make me think. Like literally don't make me think. Like obviously we have mainnet TG coming up. We were really clear, and thankfully that worked out. But yeah, learned a lot from that past thing. And then yeah, working with Coinbase and Sonar, they're awesome. Like honestly, we're partnering with them on a few different fronts as we get close to TGE, and really enjoyed working with them. They had like after the Monad ICO, like as part of their official platform, they actually stopped doing any ICOs. If you have, I'm sure people noticed that they didn't do any past Monad. And then we started to get to know them well. They seemed to like us. I think they were convinced on the quality of the project, and they were like, hey, we, in the time frame you want to do this ICO, it's unlikely we can like get the proper platform like, back, because we suspended it, but we don't want you to just do Sonar. Like maybe we could think of some kind of hybrid in the middle. And so what they ended up doing is saying, okay, if you guys we have approval for the Sonar stuff, obviously, so do that. And then on the front end, let's see if we can make it work with our legal and everything to actually show kind of a banner and ad within Coinbase and within Base. So they were like, we've been working really closely with them even to do like kind of special stuff like that. And we also have a pretty kind of unique thing that we're piloting with them as the first project upon our TGE, which I'll just tease that for a second. But yeah, loved working with the Coinbase team so far.
Awesome. It feels like this sort of Sonar thing is going to explode in a way that I think what you said about ICOs and sort of investing in pre-TGE project becoming simpler. Like I remember a time where we had the bonding curve stuff and it was just sort of really hard, like the fjord stuff as well. Do you have any advice for any founders that are looking to raise in this current environment? Like any advice that you've heard from the Coinbase team or any personal advice that you'd like to give founders yourself?
Yeah, one piece of advice is just be as like clear and transparent as humanly possible. So another thing we did alongside the ICO is we released this token disclosures doc. So we have like a 24-page doc. You can see it on actually it was linked maybe in the third post of the ICO announcement, but it's also just published on the website. And it just breaks down every possible thing we could think of around Fluent the project, like the team investment round so far, the tokenomics, the like even market making arrangements, exchange arrangements, everything, utility risks. Like we just like, hey, like what are all the risks we can think of? You should know about this. So I think there's only so much you could do in given market conditions, but I definitely think to increase your chances of success, just be like so damn transparent. And then of course with the mechanics of the sale, be really simple.
Yeah, it's like, hey, ChatGPT, read all this and tell me if this works or not, right? Like, make it that simple.
I'm sure that's what people do. I'm sure that people ran the doc in chat or Claude. That's perfectly fine. Be like, hey, just show me the red flags, but at least you have all the information.
Yeah, 100%. I think that covers sort of the raise aspect, and congratulations once again. I think the team is absolutely cooking, and we're very excited to sort of head into this TGE era and this mainnet era. Just sort of setting context on, let's take the raise aside. Let's talk about Fluent, the project. Can you sort of educate our viewers on what Fluent is, sort of where the vision came from? Talk a little bit about yourself as well. Like, let's set the foundation for the rest of the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. So I could talk about me first, and then into Fluent kind of as it got started. So my background is in cloud infrastructure. Like for 5-6 years before I even really got involved in crypto, I worked on different types of developer tools, some data science like tooling, and then some like deeper cloud infrastructure, Kubernetes optimization stuff. So I was always like a tech infra, like an infra nerd. And then so I started to get more involved in blockchain when I just started learning about Ethereum and rollups, and I'm like, hey, I know how things scale horizontally. Like I get it. Like I'm fascinated by new computing platforms. I kind of never really came from Bitcoin, DeFi, degen, like none of that, backfilled all that. But like I really came in and was like, hey, this is like a new type of computing platform that has different types of properties. You could build different types of stuff. This is really cool. And so got like sucked in there. And then we started building Fluent with the thesis of like don't bet against developer ingenuity. Like when you collapse the friction for developers to just do more stuff in an environment, usually you get some cool innovations. And so that's where we said, all right, well, there's this fragmented EVM stuff over here, and you have to pick your own chain, and there's a limited set of tools, and there's SVM stuff over there as the two more popular environments. But again, it's like fragmented. So we're like, okay, well, like that's not really how developers are used to programming, and developers coming in are going to be like increasingly less tribal, and they're just going to veer towards an environment where they could just pick up whatever tools or building blocks that have been previously made from those tools and just use them, and they should all work together. So that's kind of like the core thesis of Fluent as a chain, about 3 years ago when we started it. And that's where we got this architecture of blended execution. So this is like one environment where in current state you could deploy EVM and WASM apps, and they just work together, and we'll have SVM actually going live soon. And so you could just take all this lovely code and primitives that people have built and assets, just put them in one place on one chain, and it just works. So that's kind of the core like chain level reason for Fluent being. Then we've over time kind of built upon that, and we said, okay, like what other types of primitives can we do developers really need today inside their apps, and like what primitives can users really benefit from? And that's where we get to this notion of reputation. So like frankly, it was brought about from our experience in crypto, where we just saw the whole space dramatically over index on attention, right? Like I think for a couple of years that people just like went off the rails with like InfoFi and just like yapping and all this stuff. And not to say that like started the problem, but it definitely made it worse. And people started to go so far as using attention as like a proxy for trust. And like attention is just like a horrible proxy for trust, frankly. Like it's easy to buy, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the people who are buying that attention deserve to be like listened to or trusted. So we said, okay, well, like that's a massive problem. We see all these, like everyone in crypto is aware of all like the scams and stuff like this, but then we also started to see this incentivized like slop, and we're like, oh my god, there's all this noise, all this bullshit, and like what can you trust? And so we said, okay, can we build like a primitives on Fluent, around Fluent, that help this? And that's where we started to build Prince, which is a like reputation data platform. You can kind of roughly think about it as what Kaido did for attention, kind of like quantifying like mind share, smart followers, and helping people navigate based on attention. We're doing that for reputation with prints, right? And so, I mean, across all different, it's not just a good, bad thing, across all different contexts of, who are the best like traders, predictors, community members, holders, investors, projects, teams, like it could go across many, many different contexts. And the core goal there is, especially as, AI makes it way trickier across many other platforms to find truth. We hope that these reputation-based primitives can help give users a way to cut through the noise and also give developers a programmable building block to use.
Yeah.
So a little bit about Fluent.
Awesome. I think on the reputation side, I think that's what Nikita is trying to do with Twitter right now as well. Like he's desensitizing a lot of the creators and the type of repetitive slop that we're getting. Obviously, the Kaido play, a lot of people have called it over as well. I do want to go back to your tribalism point. Do you think there's like, do EVM devs versus like SVM devs have like their particular tribes? Like I spend a lot of time in the Solana ecosystems, and Solana developers typically don't want to go anywhere else. Like how do you view this tribalism amongst these different ecosystems?
The way we think about it is that crypto is really small today, and there's like not that many builders, and that's okay. And but what we're really building this for, like, every additional builder who comes along becomes that much less likely to be tribal, frankly. Like as crypto like matures, like blockchain stuff sits more on the back end, what you really have is like, over 2, 5, 10 years, just developers and companies coming in, and they're just saying like, okay, what are the best tools and systems to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish? And so I just think that tribalism kind of fades into the background over time, where people really just want to be able to use those tools without restrictions, and we're already seeing it, right? This isn't just a future like prediction. Like we see some like newer builders who are coming out of like SF, for example. You got like a 22-year-old kid, and like he's not thinking about like kind of the whole lore and baggage of like EVM, Ethereum versus Solana, like philosophical differences. He's just like, oh, well, I want to pick up this like cool prediction market primitive, or I want to use this like tested Solidity smart contract, or I just or maybe like I already know Rust, so I'm playing around with the SVM stuff, but also this I can vibe code the hell out of like EVM stuff really easily, and just you want to be able to put that stuff together. And I think that's like the overriding force.
Yeah, I think I've noticed this a lot with people who have joined the crypto circles this cycle. Like they don't know about Solana being halted, or they don't know about the Ethereum hack and everything that went on with the fork. Like they just don't care. Obviously, as you sort of grow into the industry, you're supposed to learn this lore, and sort of there's like a social construct towards it. We've talked about the social fragmentation within the crypto space. Can you talk a little bit about, how Fluent solves this beyond the social construct? Like, how is this technically possible to sort of blend all these execution states?
Yeah, so the reason we call it blended execution is because the mental model could actually be like you're putting these things in a blender, and out pops out this kind of like one thing from a bunch of inputs, and that's kind of what's happening at a technical level, although like there's much more to it, where we have EVM, SVM, and WASM that just compiles down, like they all have their own kind of bytecode, and they compile down to what we call RWASM, which is reduced WebAssembly. And so what that is it becomes this kind of universal translator layer. And this is all in the background, right? This is like all compiling down behind. So like, you don't even really have to worry about this as even a dev, but definitely not a user. Like you just come in with the tools that at that higher level, and then it just kind of all compiles down in the back end into this just one runtime environment that's like really easy to ZK prove. It's efficient. All this optimizations that we're making at that level. So you only have to interface with the stuff that you know.
That makes a lot of sense. What would you say is like the hardest part of building what you're building?
You'd have to ask Dimitri, our in-house gigabrain. My CTO, co-founder,
Yeah.
and very good friend and very smart guy, and I'm sure he'd have a lot to say on that. I think that from my vantage point, from like the product perspective, I think it's hard to make that work. Like a lot of people have tried to solve a similar problem over time. Like I think upwards of 10 years ago now, people realized that like WebAssembly is like a cool tool to sit at the base of different VMs and environments. But what you saw is when people tried it, it was done in a very like wonky, inefficient way, right? Like you'd have maybe like an EVM environment and people are like, how can I just force fit another VM in there? It's like, that's not how you really do it. And vice versa. You had some SVM environments in Solana with like Neon EVM and stuff like that, where it's like, okay, how can I force it this way? And like you can, I think anybody can intuit, even if you're not technical, how that could get clunky and certainly inefficient, right? And so what we said is, okay, well, let's just approach this from the ground up and let's just have this like maximally expressive environment and then build it up from there. And we did it in a way where it becomes much more seamless and efficient to support all these different environments, but also extensible. Like I don't know if I foresee in the next like few years some other VM getting like extremely popular, but if it does, we can just add it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's really the nature of it is just like, are you building it from the ground up for that purpose, or are you kind of force fitting something later?
Yeah, I think over the last cycle, and I call it last cycle, like it kind of feels weird calling it last cycle because it was like a couple of months ago. But we've seen like the Cairo stuff pop up, and then there's the Fuel VM stuff, and then obviously, Sui, Aptos, and Movement Labs made the
Yeah.
Move VM popular as well. In all those cases, like they had to teach a new developer section, a new language, and they had to sort of build reputation from the ground up, like the way that you're doing it. It's like you know what you know and you can come and build on Fluent. Is there still sort of roadblocks in building an ecosystem? Would you say like with the obvious sort of examples of what I said with Starknet and these other chains that have their own code base, when you think about Fluent, like what are some of the things that you had to sort of overcome while building the Fluent ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think ours were a little bit more market based than tech based. Like I think the cool thing about the blended execution approach is it is so seamlessly backwards compatible. So that's not really the same issue that Starknet or Fuel might be facing, because you can actually just come in and deploy EVM stuff and SVM stuff, like boom, done. If you don't want to touch the WAS and stuff at all, or you're an EVM dev and you don't know any SVM stuff, you could just deploy your code as is and it just works for the rest of the ecosystem. So that's less of a hurdle. But like the market's really saturated, clearly. Like there's a ton of chains, there's a ton of noise. And so I would say that the hurdles that we've had to like overcome and are just always overcoming is more on the market side, right? It's like how do you like get really, really sharp with your focus, whether that's the output of that is this reputation thing of like what's more of our central focus, or just like how do you stand out once you have that? How do you recruit builders once you have that, once they're with this such a noisy environment? And so we focused a lot on that, and I think what's come out of it is not only Prince and the reputation stuff, but also just like a very opinionated stance on builders. Like we definitely have a very clear view of the types of people, not just people, like as humans, like that we want to be a part of this like Fluent ecosystem. And and we've just fostered a culture around it. And this spans from are people operating in like high integrity? Are they really trying to build something that solves a problem or can make a difference in the world? Like, are they a real builder? Just put it like that way. And then there's also do they have a superpower? Do they have some kind of like unique thing that they know about the world or skill in the world that we think could really make them stand out? And frankly, we've started to treat it as a little bit more of like almost record label vibes of like a lot of people are still figuring out what kind of product they want to build. They're at different stages, but like when you see like a Kanye and you're like that's some generational talent, like you want to like welcome them into this thing. So we have this we call the Blended Builders Club, and right now it kind of functions as an accelerator, but really the vision for it is way more like a social club, or you can kind of think of it as like a record label of like, all right, we're backing this person. And you know what, over the next 5 to 10 years, maybe they do have 3 or 4 hits, who knows, like apps. I think with all like the AI stuff going on, it's the nature of building apps is starting to shift. You actually have like less technical people, and like you also have the ability to run quite a number of experiments much more quickly. You're able to run experiments in parallel, and like we just want to be supportive of that new way of building things. And so that's kind of how we've oriented this Blended Builders Club. And so it's really more about the builder. So I guess coming back to your question, we've had to just be like really sharp in what we want and like executing on like getting those types of people. And I think we've built a good first two cohorts of the Blended Builders Club. And if you don't do that, if you're not like hyper focused on like exactly what you want and go out and get it, like you're not going to stand out in the market.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of Jamie Foxx's story on Kanye, as you said. Like, he sort of saw him in the party, put him in the room, and he sort of made magic happen. With that said, how are you feeling about the Fluent ecosystem heading into mainnet?
I feel good. I think we've really focused a lot on this Splendid Builders Club, and we have about 10 members of it and corresponding apps that are going to be live right away. So feel good about that. Right now, like we have a private mainnet that's going, and this is just where you get all the infra dependencies and stuff that like other things that the apps like need to function, and then also test and make sure everything's good. We're also working really closely with them on their kind of growth strategies. So yeah, getting everything ready, but feel good about those cohorts of builders being ready right away. The thing that's cool is we're starting to see like the more Fluent does build up to launch and gain, more attention. There's new people coming to us. Like I'm getting like more and more DMs of projects that, yeah, they might not be like in the Blended Builders Club. They might not be exclusive to Fluent. They might, but this is at the end of the day, a permissionless network. And like we welcome more projects to deploy. So we're kind of starting to branch out from that like hyper sharp focus on like this core group of club members and starting to mold the support around other apps that want to come and deploy, whether it's from Solana, whether it's from Ethereum, other L2s, doesn't matter. And we're just getting that motion going, but we're seeing a good inflow, which is cool. And then we're also seeing some kind of network effects around some of the builders that we're working so closely with, introduce other ones. And yeah, there's some cool stuff happening.
Is there anyone that you want to shout out that everyone should be looking towards, maybe now or at day one of mainnet?
Oh, I can't pick favorite children. There's only like a handful of no, I would probably say that the one that's that I want to call out is definitely in a unique scenario. It's called Nerona. So Nerona is they're building like a neobank really focused on like high net worth in Southeast Asia, and it was basically co-founded or founded by Marco, who was running DeFi for us. I actually met him as he was an early investor from Primitive Ventures, who they placed an early check in Fluent. We got to know each other really well. Then he actually came on to help us with DeFi and all things like liquidity at Fluent. And then over the summer, he's like, man, like I see this opportunity to build a stablecoin startup, and like it's just so clear that I have an edge there. And we were trying to figure out a way to still work together. And so like, as that's kind of gradually spinning out, we're like, wait a minute, it actually makes sense for us to have a native stablecoin on Fluent. And so we worked out a way to actually make this thing as he kind of spins out, and that takes on a whole life of its own. And we actually worked out a way to have that be the native stablecoin on the Fluent network. And that has a bunch of ecosystem value that I'm happy to speak to, because we get that question a lot. But yeah, I'd probably shout out Marco.
For sure. And for everyone's context, Marco, he's a very close friend of mine. He obviously used to work at Primitive. He also runs a pod with two Lambros. I'm pretty sure everyone sort of seen him on the timeline. Let's talk a little bit about the stablecoin. I think like DeFi yield has become such an important topic. I think the conversation has evolved from where is the yield coming from to is the yield safe? Like sort of DeFi goes through these cycles every season. Let's talk about the stablecoin.
Let's do it. So I'll touch on a couple things you just said. So where's the yield coming from? So it's a T-bill, pretty straightforward, T-bill backed, US T-bill backed stablecoin. And that's all using M0 infrastructure. So it's like pretty clear cut. I think there's like a front end facing app side of it, and then there's like the stable-coin itself. So the front end facing app side of it is, like I said, really tailored towards high net worth individuals, Southeast Asia. Like Marco has like a really like finely segmented persona, and I think he's going to crush that. As the overlap with Fluent, like there is this USDnr, which is what we're making the native stablecoin of Fluent network. And so then the yield, that's like any other like US stablecoin, except the yield actually goes to Fluent Foundation, right? And so what is Fluent Foundation? Fluent Foundation is a nonprofit that's like mandate is fully to like steward and help the growth of Fluent network. And so instead of like that yield just going to some other third party like Circle or Tether, it could actually be used to repurpose and fuel like the growth of Fluent as a network, because that's literally the only thing that Fluent Foundation is meant for. And so it can kind of be like it scales with the adoption of Fluent, and that just creates like a nice flywheel where like the more use of this stuff, the more use of USDnr, the more it fuels growth of Fluent network, and the more that yield can be used for things that align with apps much better than if Fluent Foundation was forced to sustain from transaction fees. Like now, because there's this USDnr yield, it aligns incentives so nicely, because if Fluent Foundation can sustain from USDnr yield, then the goal is to just get transaction fees down to as close to zero as humanly possible, because it's like there isn't really a purpose for that anymore. Right now, the base case of a chain is like there's this kind of weird perverse incentive where it's like people, the chain wants to get revenue to repurpose for all good things, but at the same time, like the apps that you're servicing also want the transaction fees down, and the users do too. So yeah, I would say it gives like a stream of revenue that just creates better alignment with the Fluent eco.
That makes sense. Sort of closing out the conversation on the ecosystem, a part of our viewership is people who want to build new cool things, and we typically ask founders like, "Hey, is there an RFP of something that you'd want to see built on top of your stack?" Do you have something in mind that someone from our viewership should build?
I want to see so many things built, man. It's hard for me sometimes to not just like go start vibe coding apps. Let's see. I think we're very, just to put it digestibly, like we're pretty excited about people who are using prints obviously as a core input. So we have this one as an example. We have Vena, who is it's a lending and borrowing app. Not like they haven't yet innovated on anything like technically, like besides the fact that the whole like lending and borrowing mechanics are based on different types of reputation. So that's the core thing. The core difference is actually integrating this like Prince reputation data layer and saying like, okay, well, people coming in with different reputation can get different kind of rates, and also like that kind of feeds into itself, because then you could start building reputation around your lending and borrowing activity, and so then it just kind of like you get more and more benefits as that system flows. So anything that's using like Prince as a reputation signal is interesting. I personally am under the assumption, my one of my theses is that some of like the creator consumer type stuff is actually still really, really interesting. I think a lot of the big like chains gave up on it, frankly. And a lot of projects decided to just double down on like payments or things that were like more clear cut and monetizable in the near term. But I frankly, I think that people are giving up on that too soon. And I do think that there's like, you can find novel ways to experiment with like creator market mechanics and things like that are sustainable, that you can actually like iterate on ways to bridge trust with the outside world of people, who might be able to make use of these crypto tools for making money, connecting with their audience, all that kind of stuff. And the beauty about that is like when you actually are able to capture kind of new types, let's just call them creators on chain, then you could take all this beautiful DeFi stuff, literally like the best financial services the world has ever seen with crypto, and just plug it in. Like you're putting a bank account in somebody's hand, and then you can give them lending and borrowing, and all this stuff just works really nicely together. And so anything on that front, I feel like is right now being very underrated. Yeah, those are two examples. And honestly, any kind of novel experimentation that uses some of the awesome primitives that have been built today. Like I think we've built a lot of really cool stuff in crypto. And just because people haven't really cracked it from like a product and go to market perspective doesn't mean these aren't like really interesting primitives to experiment with. So yeah, hopefully that's at least helpful, but yeah, we're pretty open.
Yeah. What I'm going to try to build is I'm going to try to build an IDE. Every time you press run, it puts on like a blender on the screen, and that's sort of how you get into the Fluent execution environment. I think that would be pretty cool to sort of see on day one.
You could probably spin that up pretty quickly. Like you can probably vibe code that nicely.
Yeah, probably today. Last couple of questions. I know we're coming up on time. In a lot of your writing, I've seen you reference like Amazon as sort of how things should be done. Talk to me about that. Like, what's the inspiration there? How has it influenced sort of how you build Fluent? What's the story there?
Yeah, so what you're referring to with Amazon is the classic like working backwards framework that they implemented, right? And like so what that is whenever there's some kind of new initiative, they like work backwards from like almost like a press statement on, what is this thing doing for the user? So they really reinforce this framework as a way to think through the lens of a user and what people will give a shit about, and then kind of work backwards from that. And so that's something that's clearly been proven very, very successful, whether you look at like Apple, Amazon, et cetera. And so the question we asked was like, can you replicate this type of thing in like a decentralized, chain ecosystem environment? And in our opinion, it's harder, but doable. Like you can actually, because, in a decentralized setting, right, like you can't control all of these different components, but you can control the culture that you foster. And part of that culture that you foster can be the social cohesion that people want to work together in this way. And so that's what we've tried to do. And so just to make that more concrete, we will have a couple of, I'll call them experiences, like at launch, where we've worked backwards and said, here's a really cool problem to solve. Here are some of the, the apps, the primitives that are in the Fluent ecosystem that could, be very impactful to solve that problem. So a lot of these things can kind of hook together like building blocks. And then we would go and talk to the teams and be like, what do you guys think? And I mean, it seems to be working out. I think it's really helpful that the culture around the Splendid Builders Club is that people are looking to kind of find ways to help each other and help other people help them, and it's just kind of working. And so, yeah, it's what you'll see as we launch is a couple experiences that do work backwards from, here's a clear problem we're trying to solve in the world, and here's 1, 2, 3, 4 of the Fluent apps that are all integrated into it to kind of compound the value.
That makes sense. Dino, this has been awesome. I do want to leave everyone listening in with a CTA of sorts. Like, what are some things that people can do between now? Like, now that the Coinbase ICO is over, what are some things that they can do now on private mainnet before mainnet is live?
So private mainnet, unfortunately, is kind of closed off just because it is all about just getting the apps to deploy and making sure their infra set up and testing things. That's kind of that's what that's for. I would say as a CTA, I mean, I guess just follow along the Twitter account, like clearly crypto Twitter, like just crypto lives on Twitter, and we're going to be like announcing a bunch of cool stuff in preparation for mainnet launch, and which is also coming very, very quickly. So I think by the time this is out, people might be able to actually just do things on the mainnet.
All right. I will ask the God-forsaken question of when mainnet. I probably don't want to answer, but it is my right. It is my sort of prerogative to ask that. Like, when is mainnet?
It's hilariously close.
Yes, that already discussed. All right. Cool. Any final thoughts for everyone listening in?
No, appreciative of the time. It was fun jumping on here.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks.